Good morning. Today is Monday, January 5th. It is 10 a.m. and I call this meeting of the Platte County Commission to order. Commissioner Burbrick, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I will.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Clerk, please call the roll. Yes.
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 That motion carries 3-0. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar.
I move to approve consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Clerk, please call the roll. Yes.
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 That motion carries 3-0. Next is business action items, and the first is a public hearing to adopt the budget, and that will be presented by Platte County Auditor Kevin Robinson. It is 10:01 a.m. and the public hearing is now open.
Good morning,
Mr. Auditor.
And Happy New Year. Kevin Robinson, Platte County Auditor. Commissioners, if you'll recall, on December 15th, I made a request to have this public hearing this morning at 10 a.m. during the first session of 2026. And this is for consideration of the commission proposed budget for 2026. The commission proposed budget was published on December 23rd, Wednesday, late in the afternoon. Statute required that it be published by Friday morning. That would have been December 26th at 10 a.m. So we've met the statutory requirements for publication. The proposed budget was made available online, as well as there was hard copies available through the commission office and the county clerk. The documents contained within the document published is the budget message, overview of the funds, the commission proposed revenues and expenditures, and the appropriation order. This morning, we're going to go through a number of items.
You ready?
There are a couple items that need to be called out prior to going through the agenda items. The first item is within the collector's budget. It is General Fund 1001-3100 collector. Within her fund legal line, in some of the budget meetings was reduced from a requested $30,000 to $20,000. The $30,000 was also her 2025 budgeted amount. Missouri statutes 52.317 prohibit the commission from reducing prior budgeted funds. So with that, and there is an amended commission proposed budget, I have increased that to $30,000 to ensure that no budget is presented that could be in violation of Missouri statutes. Also, the commission proposed budget was proposed and published. That went through December 23rd. So since then, we have received additional cash. So I have amended the cash carryover for all of the funds, but specifically for the general fund. It raised from the $5.4 million that was presented to $5.6 million. So about $217,000 was collected in those final days. The clerk has been, like I said, the clerk has been given a revised copy of the commission proposed budget with a few changes in it respective to cash and the item that I have called out for the collector. The other impact, the other item that has changed as a result of this is the transfer from the law enforcement tax to the general fund. That $217,000 that was received in the general fund in those last days of the year will reduce from roughly $1.2 million down to $1 million. And I'll talk more about that momentarily. So other than that, there have been no other changes or requested changes that were made to this budget. As far as the agenda, again, key dates, just a little history of how we got to where we are today. The purpose of the meeting, I'm going to address a few of the significant changes. We're going to talk about the transfers in a little bit more detail, encumbrance standards, fiscal policy, couple closing remarks, and then open it up to public comment. So a couple of the key dates from the budget development for the 26 budget. On July 21st, I published the 26 budget development process, RSMO 50.540. In August, all office holders and department heads submitted revenue and expenditure requests. And this is the first time that's actually been done in our new financial system, which I will say has worked quite well through this process. On November 14th, I published the auditor's recommended budget. Then in November, after that, in November and December, there's an opportunity for the commission to review. On December 15th, again, requested and you approved for this public hearing this morning. And then on January 5th, here we are for consideration of the proposed budget in possible vote following the public hearing. So the purpose of today's is, again, discuss significant budgetary items, some major changes to the auditor's recommended budget. In those, I will be addressing Zona Rosa, boarding of prisoners, radio system, in the LET and law enforcement tax transfers, and then cost of living wage adjustments. From there, again, I'm going to discuss possible policies or standards, which will go in line with what I added to the auditor's recommended budget this year, which was an expanded budget philosophy. The intent of that and the intent of these two policies that I'll be proposing today for development is strengthen our position as pursuit of restoring our credit rating. The important measuring factors by the credit bureaus. And then, of course, we're going to have, if anybody has any comments following my presentation, we'll open the floor up for comments. So, commissioners, we're going to start with a favorite of yours, Zona Rosa. We've been doing this for several years. The auditor's recommended budget included a proposal of $2.9 million to cover bond principal and interest payments. As per the bond documents, the chief financial officer, in this capacity, I'm functioning as the auditor/budget officer. But for the bond documents, the chief financial officer is to request that backup funding be made available for those bonds. Of course, the main funding is from the TIFs that are associated in the neighborhood development TIFs that are down in Zona Rosa. That's where the funding comes from. This money, should there be a need for it, would be a backup to any shortfalls in collections in Zona Rosa. So the ARB did recommend the $2.9 million. As you can see in the far column to the right, the 26 proposed budget, you have removed the auditor's recommended proposed budget of the principal and interest. With that, I respectfully request that we reinstate these amounts in your budget.
The county commission has considered this item. As it was explained to me when I started as a county commissioner, the commission is legally obligated to consider appropriating these funds. The county auditor is required to recommend that we appropriate these funds, but we have talked about it and considered it, and we do not think it's appropriate to include these funds in the approved budget. And the next item on the agenda after the budget is an order authorizing the county to completely withdraw from public financing of the Zona Rosa shopping district. So for this year's budget, we have thought about it, and my recommendation is we do not fund this budget line to cover shortfalls.
So before I move on, I do want to point out, and for folks that have not seen any of our new budget documents or financial reporting, this is government funding accounting. So revenues are actually shown in a negative. So in the top line, and as we go through several slides, you will see this. The $2.9 million is shown as a negative. The expenditures are whole numbers. And then there's a -1 at the bottom. That actually shows $1 in revenue, which is considered a balanced fund. So with that, I respectfully accept your decision on the appropriation for Zona Rosa. Commissioners, the next item is boarding of prisoners. As you're well aware, in 2025, boarding of prisoners, and this is housing inmates while waiting their trials in other jurisdictions because the jail capacity is not capable of handling these positions or these individuals. In 2025, we started the budget. I'll draw your attention to the right-hand side of this. We budgeted $140,000. It wasn't long into the year that we knew that the amount would far exceed this, and the decision was made to address it at the end of the year once we had a better idea of how much boarding the prisoners actually cost for the year. When we closed the books, the year-to-date for 2025 was just over $1 million in boarding costs to the county. The sheriff has requested for 2026 $1.26 million and for boarding of prisoners. The auditor's recommended budget had $600,000. The purpose of this, again, funding part of it in contingency as we had done in 2025, the monies are there. The money's still under your control. Should it be needed to be used somewhere else, so once appropriated to the sheriff, it remains under his control. The commission proposed is at $1 million. The primary objective that I had in recommending the $600,000, substantially less than what the sheriff had requested, was an intent to create conversation about ways that can be address this overcrowding of our jail and see if we can't stop some of this significant outlay of cash resources of the county's taxpayers on this function of government. So with that, I respectfully request that you put it back to the $600,000. You have again proposed $1 million. The $400,000 would be moved from this to contingency.
Respectfully, your intent to spur on discussion of this issue is not necessary. We are already discussing the issue on a regular basis. We appreciate your position on this. We will leave the budget exactly where we have it, which is $1 million.
Did Allison have a comment?
Commissioner Vanover.
Right. My recollection during all of our budget discussions was that perhaps the $600,000 number was calculated incorrectly or with some very basic estimates that were maybe out of line from what we discussed with the sheriff. I think we came up with a number of around $35 a night, but the number was actually $55 a night. And I thought that there was some admission that perhaps that calculation of 600,000 was lower than it really should have been because of some of those estimated numbers were different than what the sheriff had used in his estimates.
That is correct. In the sense it wasn't an incorrect estimate. It was done by some pretty soft assumptions. In looking at it historically, because the number of inmates that are outsourced has fluctuated as low as 20 up to as high as 100. So to establish it as a hard line based on 25's history makes a pretty hard assumption of all other variables equal, and I don't think that's realistic. And again, the purpose of the move was to keep the money under your control and then fund it as needed.
Sure. And I think we also discussed the fact that even when the ARB here was published, an estimate year end of $704,000, there was an entire invoice from another county of upwards of $150,000 or more that just appeared. We didn't expect it. It was unpaid. We didn't know it was coming. So which is why the number went from $704,000 to a year to date of $1.05 million. So I think also that 600,000 estimate was closer to year end, and all of a sudden that year end number skyrocketed. And as far as having that the extra $400,000 in contingency, I think we discussed that when those bills come in, like this $150,000 from another county, we have to pay that. We have to pay those counties. We can't just say, oh, sorry, that's not in our budget. You housed our inmates for us, thanks, but we're not paying it. So it has to be spent. And we have way overcrowded our prison, and so those inmates have to go somewhere. So we're comfortable with our $1 million budget on that line item.
And that other variable is accurate. Back in the end of October, when I finalized this, year-end projections were at 700. We didn't need $1 million.
Right.
Million over. So that is a contributing factor, most definitely. So respectfully honor your request. Sorry, the fact this thing keeps falling off. Next item is radio systems. There's a long history of radios. I saw former Commissioner Siebert in here, who's been through a number of these conversations. They started back in 2011, as I recall, and with the initial consideration for upgrading to narrowband the radio systems. Again, I'm going to draw your attention to the right over here. The 25 budget was for $147,000. The budget was revised back in August to $887,000 after discussions with the sheriff to consider implementing the plan that was supposed to launch in 2027 to go ahead and start this year. And this was for the console installation with Motorola.
Sorry.
All right. In today's world, when you hear something like that, you got to look up.
Right.
Year to date for the radio's operation, we actually have paid on that contract $332,000. In August, the sheriff did do an encumbrance of $555,000 to cover the balance of that contract. So for 2026, he did request $1.6 million. Again, moving up the schedule 27-28 replacement of radio equipment. Would be a single purchase for all the replacement equipment that's needed. That combined with the encumbrance, and again, I'm going to talk more about encumbrances momentarily, that along with the $555,000 would have put the budget for 2026 for operations for this one line item, which is at the very bottom of that page, if you can see it. That is improvements, and this is a capital investment account, but it would have made it at $2.1 million. After discussions, the commission has revised this number, and I support this number, pending some information that the sheriff is in process of obtaining for us, and that was changed to $100,000. Adding it to the encumbrance, you will note that this is at $655,000. Again, encumbrances, I'll talk in more detail about those momentarily. But I did want this to be known. There is some looming large costs. This was about a $4 million project, as I recall, in total, over about a 3-year period. The funding that was used for this contract this year actually came out of some pre-funding, or basically we had set up a reserve in radio leases where all the prior activity had been. And my $600,000 was in anticipation of 3 years, financed with a third purchase, paid out the contract over a 3-year period. But we did have about $1 million set aside in anticipation moving towards this 27 project. So that money was used. There was an amendment done to move that money from leases into this fund to cover that contract. So just wanted to make sure that that was clearly understood, because I know your intent was for $100,000, but the rollover encumbrance makes it $655,000. Any questions on that, commissioners? So summary of the transfer activity for the law enforcement tax. And this is very important, again, for your understanding, commissioners, as well as the citizens of Platte County. This slide is a year over year, but comparing 25 to 26. For the last couple of years, there's been a little bit of change in philosophy of what's happening with the law enforcement reserve accounts. As you'll notice under 25 year ending cash carryover, there are 3 funds listed. That Fund 2500, because the tax is considered a special revenue tax, this is where all of the sales tax that are associated with the law enforcement portion of the county's taxes are receipted. Cash balance at the end of that this year was $1.9 million in that fund. We had set up under Commissioner Schreiber, Fund 2505, which was a reserve account. And for a number of years, we put 10% of the collections into that reserve. Because in 2019, when this plan was initially proposed, it was a deficit plan at that time. And somewhere in 25, 26, the countywide expenditures would exceed revenues. So we were setting some money aside in this fund with the intention of use to help cover any shortfalls in the last couple of years of the law enforcement tax. And then the last one, 2510, was actually a separate item where we had set $690,000 up for a remodel of the prosecutor's office. And with ARPA and unforeseen at the time, that has been done, and these funds are no longer needed for that purpose. So in the 26 budget, what I proposed was closing of 2505 and 2510. That's why you see under the 26 estimated year in cash of 0 and 0. Those monies, the 2.1 and the 700,000, are moved up into Fund 2500. Okay. There is roughly $6 million estimated in sales tax collections for this fund this year. We are budgeted now for $7 million in transfers out. This number of $3.5 million will now be about $3.7 million with the 200,000 difference, the reduced what needs to be transferred out this year because of additional cash that came in. So the estimated fund balance at the end of 26 for this fund again is roughly about $3.7 million. Again, this was actions, it was my recommendation. So again, this is informative information. Commissioner?
This is a direct reflection of the overall budget situation, which is rapidly growing law enforcement expenses and flat revenue. So as a result, yes, we are depleting Fund 2505, which is the law enforcement reserve account. And it is a trend that needs to be fixed. And we took some steps in the current budget to address that.
This next slide.
And of course, we have much more work to do in the future as well. Yeah.
Next slide just summarizes what I had just said. Again, how we get to that 3.5, now 3.7. There's roughly $6 million in taxes. Interest income this year was about $45,000 for this fund. The transfers in of the 1.9 and the 700, the 2.1 and the 694,000 plus the yearly cash of the 1.9 gets us to 10,800,000, 10,900,000. Again, at the time of this, prior to year-end closing, which happened over the weekend, this was at 7.3 was our estimated transfer out, which was $1.2 million. And so now we're going to be at about 7.1 total transfer out. Again, leaving year-end cash in this fund estimated at about $3.7, $3.8 million.
Again, this reduction in cash carryover from what is the 2025 cash carryover number? It's in the $6+ million range, I believe.
In general fund or in this
Yes.
fund? I mean, if you add the three together, you're at 5.5, 5.
Well, the $3.5 million cash carryover at the end of the 2026 is a reduction from previous years. And that is a direct reflection of what I just discussed, which is rapidly increasing law enforcement costs and flat revenues.
I have a question. What I see in this is our law enforcement reserve fund is shrinking by about $1 million this year. when the last few years it had been increasing. Is that right?
That is correct.
And your screens show it went from about 4.7 million down to 3.6 million. You're saying because of the recent collections, it's going from 4.7 to 3.7 or 3.8 million?
No, sir. That's not what I'm saying. The collections are, fairly steady, as Commissioner Fricker said. Sales tax year 25 over 24 were flat.
Right.
So that collection, which is that top number of $6 million, is very close to what this year's was.
So our balance of the law enforcement reserve will be $3.6 million in 2026.
3 points, somewhere right in there, correct.
Okay.
It is a reduction because of activity within the general fund.
Right.
Again, increased expenditures with flat revenues, as the commissioner has said, yes.
And this is a tax that runs until 2030.
30.
Correct. It sunsets in 2030.
So if we withdraw another million from it in 2027, then it's down to 2.6, and another million in 28 and 29. It's basically going to be empty just before the sales tax expires.
Again, all variables equal, yes, sir. So variables that could affect this as the year goes, you certainly can amend a budget. If sales tax increases this year,
Right.
then there'll be less need for that $1 million transfer. So, there is a direct relationship between the two funds and the activity within collections. So if we came in at 6.5, because that's the same number, well, that's half of what the general fund will receive this year in collections. But if we came in at 6.5, that means the general fund's going to be $1 million higher, and perhaps that money may not be needed. Or next year's drawdown on this fund, the reserve may not be needed. Additionally, this could go up if we came in at 6.5, because that $6 million is the budgeted amount. So any collections over that $6 million stay in this for future reserves.
But it looks like we're on a course to drain the reserve account before the tax expires.
If some action is not taken to either increase revenues through a variety of different opportunities that are out there, or we have to reduce expenditures going forward.
Understood. Thank you. Just want to make sure I understood what you're saying.
That's why I wanted to take a moment and go through this, because it's a lot of money. We're moving it around, and it's being used for the purpose it was set up for.
Right.
To cover a shortfall in the general fund. But that is the run rate of the trend at this point. It will be drawn down and prior to the end of, before the next renewal.
Thank you.
Anything else on this? Very quickly, I'm going to go through a couple slides again. This is we did this year's budget in the Tyler. This shows the activity. You can see here, this is actually the transfer in, again, negatives or revenue. So this will be adjusted down to 7.1. There is a list of items that we will make sure is available of all the year-end closing entries, but again, 7.1 being transferred in. Then here's at the bottom, you'll see circled, there's the transfer out. And this is from Fund 2500. And again, all of these have been updated in the copy that the clerk has. And then here's the next slide shows the 2.5 and then, or the 2.1 and the 700. Again, these are transfers out. These are the closing entries of these two funds. And again, you'll notice on the left, funds transferred out to Fund 2500. So again, just wanted to demonstrate how you would actually see it within the budget. Next item. Again, continuing with the reduction. I want to talk a little bit about how it went from 1.8 down to 1.2, because the auditors included $1.8 million transfer. There were several items that I adjusted in my recommended budget that had a total of 1.8 as a necessary balancing fund transfer. The commission has taken several other actions that are listed here. First, there's 334 roughly in COLAs. This is general fund only number, and it does not include, there was an inflated number within the IT that wasn't part of the 2.5% reduction in COLA. I did not include that in this number, but to kind of give you a number of what the 2.5% adjustment did. So as far as the reduction in the COLAs, again, ARB was at 5% for county employees, juvenile at 16. There are a couple exceptions in there, but it is as requested. And then the commission proposed is at 2.5% for county employees, juvenile still at the 16. At this point, Mr. Zahn has asked to comment on this particular aspect of discussion. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Zahn for just a moment.
Thank you, Auditor Robinson. Presiding Commissioner Fricker, Commissioner Burbridge, Commissioner Vanover, it's my great pleasure to be here today. I'd like to begin by reading a series of texts between Presiding Commissioner Fricker and me on a thread that included Sheriff Holland. These texts were exchanged 3 days ago. Copies of these texts will be made available to the media along with other documents following my remarks. At 10:04 on Friday, January 2nd, I sent Presiding Commissioner Fricker this text. Scott, are you available to meet with Eric, meaning Platte County Sheriff Eric Holland, and me about the commission's 2026 budget? I proposed coffee at Fitty's at 10 a.m. Presiding Commissioner Fricker immediately responded, no, sorry, and besides, the 2026 budget is done. I immediately replied, okay, I'll make my comments publicly Monday. I wanted to give you a chance first, but I understand you're not interested in that. Presiding Commissioner Fricker then said, I had a long conversation with Eric, meaning Sheriff Eric Holland, last week, and I suspect your concerns are similar. Everyone wants more money, not just the two of you. We will spend $3 million more on building improvements than we had in ARPA funds, a big chunk of which went into your space so that you could have a professional space for your attorneys. Same thing for the sheriff's office. We are burning money faster than we're making it, and something had to be done. I would appreciate it if you wouldn't ask me for money we don't have. I replied, that's fine. I'm just going to tell the public the truth about your supposed support for law enforcement. Hope you have a good weekend. Presiding Commissioner Fricker then stated, I gave you everything you asked for over the last 3 budgets, and because your staff didn't get bigger raises than everyone else, you're going to do this? You do what you have to do. I did not reply. Sadly, given that Presiding Commissioner Fricker refused to meet with Sheriff Anna Holland and me privately, I'm here to, in Presiding Commissioner Fricker's words, do what I have to do. Frankly, I do not expect my words to have any impact because according to Presiding Commissioner Fricker, the budget is already done. I'm nevertheless compelled to speak. I have the great honor, and it's also a solemn responsibility to speak on behalf of the people of Platte County and the state of Missouri in the people's courts. I treasure that honor. Today, I'm required to do so in the commission's chambers. I'm deeply worried about the decision the commission is about to make not to fully fund law enforcement, contrary to Presiding Commissioner Fricker's repeated campaign pledges and public pronouncements. Presiding Commissioner Fricker has told the media and the public that Platte County just has excess cash. About a year ago, he told public radio station KCR that sales tax revenues will be $2 million over projections, which should cover any budget shortfalls. He continued by saying, there's really no chance that we're going to have to cut services or anything like that. Similarly, on his campaign website, Presiding Commissioner Fricker tells voters that this commission is as fiscally conservative as we can be. Then he speaks to public safety. His website says this: public safety was my #1 priority in my previous campaign. And since being elected, I've participated in 3 budgets. This year will be my 4th, and we have fully funded the sheriff's office, the prosecutor's office, and the courts all 3 years. And though I haven't seen budget requests yet for 2026, I suspect we'll fully fund these important agencies once again. And it's true. Presiding Commissioner Fricker fully funded law enforcement the first 3 years he was in office. Suddenly, though, now he's had a change of heart. Despite telling voters that Platte County has excess cash, he is now unwilling to fully fund law enforcement. He tells the sheriff and me in a text that Platte County is burning money faster than we are making it, and I would appreciate it if you would not ask me for money we do not have. You might wonder what has changed. Well, let me tell you the sad story of what has changed. 2 weeks ago, nearly every office holder sat with this entire commission, and we poured over the budget almost line by line. When we discussed the budget for the prosecuting attorney's office, the commission not only left that budget intact, it committed to adding some funding. I appreciated that and believed that Presiding Commissioner Fricker's comment to fully fund law enforcement was intact. Unfortunately, that meeting didn't end there. I made what now appears to be a serious mistake. I inquired of this commission whether it intended to fund a study of our criminal justice system to help us expedite case resolution. We do a lot of things right in Platte County, but it takes us too long to resolve criminal cases. The fact that too many people are in our jail for too long awaiting resolution of their charges is making our jail overcrowding problem worse. As you've already seen, our county is projected to spend about $1.2 million this year simply to incarcerate prisoners in other counties because we've run out of room for lawbreakers in our own jail. I propose that we spend a very small fraction of that money, $25,000 to $75,000, to see if we could reduce the jail population by processing cases more quickly. I told this commission that while I was uncertain how much money we would actually save from the study and how much it would reduce our jail population, I was confident we could easily save more than the study would cost by decreasing the average length of stay for at least some inmates. I naively thought that my request was a no-brainer. And I'll admit, I lost my cool when the commission appeared unwilling to spend a relatively small amount of money to potentially save hundreds.
He didn't just
Hundreds.
lose his cool. It was super inappropriate, and he used foul language and stood up and shook his finger and screamed and yelled at the room. And I was very offended.
That is accurate.
Matt, continue.
I've never heard you use the F word so much as in that meeting. I've known you for more than 25 years. You raised your voice, you yelled at us, you pointed your finger, you were profane, you stormed out. It was out of character. I was shocked.
It was super disrespectful and very offensive.
I was worried about you, that something had changed, because that was just not you.
Everybody was embarrassed except you.
May I continue?
Sure.
I lost my cool because I naively thought that when the commission appeared unwilling to spend a relatively small amount of money, I just couldn't understand why we wouldn't do that to save hundreds of thousands of dollars. I couldn't understand why this commission was unwilling to fund a partial solution for the jail overcrowding problem it had created by failing on 2 occasions to effectively communicate to the voters why we needed more jail space. And yes, I use strong language to make my point. When Presiding Commissioner Fricker loudly declared that my part of the meeting was over, I left, only to return a few minutes later to apologize for my overheated word choice.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. You didn't stay on the topic of the $65,000 study, which, by the way, the sheriff has now offered to fund. And that was before you contacted me about meeting on Saturday. So that issue was apparently resolved before you asked to meet on Saturday. But then you launched into a blame game with regard to the jail proposal last week. You blamed me personally for losing the jail vote. Completely off topic and incredibly offensive. We worked very hard at getting that jail proposal passed, and you did almost nothing. And yet, in a discussion that had nothing to do with it, you put the blame for not passing that on me. And I will also say that your comments seem to be directed at me. You say presiding commissioner when it comes to all of these things. That does a disservice to the other commissioners who have an equal vote in all of these conversations. And you asking me to meet on Saturday prior to the vote was a little bit late. And it assumes that I could have done something about it alone. We've been in budget meetings for months. You attended one. And in that meeting, you lost your cool and embarrassed everybody, including yourself. And you launched into a tirade about a completely unrelated topic. Go on.
Thank you. I'll continue. When Presiding Commissioner Frickley loudly declared that the meeting was over, I left and then I returned.
I did not say the meeting was over. I said I was no longer going to discuss it with you. If you're going to put words in my mouth, be accurate.
When Commissioner Fricker loudly declared that he was no longer willing to discuss it, I left, and then I came back minutes later to apologize. I apologized for my overheated word choice, and I admitted that that was a mistake. But I told everyone present that I stood by my sentiments. Each of these commissioners said they accepted my apology.
I did not. I did not say that.
I did not. You asked me to shake your hand.
I did not.
I did not.
Apparently they didn't accept my apology, and I will apologize again, just as I did the next morning. I apologized by email, again stating that I regretted using charge language, but nevertheless attempting to persuade the commission to fund this important study intended to improve the county's ability to effectively enforce the law. I continue to believe that trying to reduce our jail population so we have enough room to incarcerate dangerous offenders is the right thing to do. This commission, not the sheriff, not the prosecutor, but this commission has an obligation to provide sufficient jail space so we can put violent criminals behind bars to prevent them from preying on vulnerable and law-abiding Black Counties. In any event, I thought the matter was settled, and I would just await the commission's decision on what seemed like an easy and uncontroversial topic. I never expected in my wildest dreams that this commission, these 3 commission members who together make decisions, would cut law enforcement funding after Presiding Commissioner Fricker had repeatedly told Platte County citizens that we had plenty of cash.
We did not cut law enforcement funding. Law enforcement funding is up in your department and in the sheriff's department. It is not up as high as you want, but there was no cut in funding, to be accurate.
May I continue?
Go right ahead.
I never expected that this commission would take a balanced budget provided by the budget officer of this county, Auditor Kevin Robinson, and cut it by $600,000 for law.
The auditor does not set policy. That is the commission's prerogative, and the final budget is our prerogative. We have no responsibility to do what the auditor recommends. Go on.
It is absolutely true. This commission is the policy-making body of this county. They have all the power. They get to decide whether law enforcement is fully funded or not. And I never imagined that this commission would take the recommended budget, a balanced budget by the auditor, and decide to cut law enforcement by $600,000 from that budget. Unfortunately, my trust in presiding Commissioner Fricker's public pronouncements about fully funding law enforcement was misplaced. That's the trouble with words, right? It's far too easy for a politician to say one thing, but do entirely the opposite thing.
I'm going to give you one more minute.
I now feel like I've been scammed, and I fear presiding Commissioner Fricker will try to hoodwink the voters in a bid to stay in power. I'll repeat for the last time what presiding Commissioner Fricker repeatedly tells voters. Law enforcement is his number one priority. I actually used to believe that. I believed that Commissioner Fricker believed that because he did fully fund law enforcement until today. The only conclusion I can draw from his sudden about face is that presiding Commissioner Fricker has new priorities, and law enforcement is not chief among them. Today's budget cuts made at the 11th hour with no notice to those affected and no willingness to discuss them appears rash and ill-considered. Here's the thing. Presiding
We
Commissioner...
made those cuts in a meeting with all the elected officials present. We weren't hiding anything from anyone. All elected office holders were present in our meeting when we went over these changes.
May I continue? Here's the thing. Presiding Commissioner Fricker can
30 seconds.
only claim that we have excess cash, and then he won't claim to cut critical services and then slash $600,000 from law enforcement funding unless one other thing is true. Presiding Commissioner Fricker no longer believes that law enforcement is a critical government service.
All right, your time is up. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I have a response, if you don't mind.
I believe that the law is that this portion of the meeting is controlled by the county auditor. County auditor, would you like me to continue? For this reason,
Can you give us an idea of how much longer so people can know so they don't have to stick here all morning?
I got a couple more things I want to say.
Okay, let's hear them.
Today, I am publicly withdrawing my endorsement of Scott Fricker for re-election. I'm also publicly asking for a refund of my multiple campaign contributions to him, just like I would ask for a refund for a car that turned out to be a lemon. And I will no longer attend presiding Commissioner Fricker's campaign events to be trotted out like a show pony when he falsely claims to support law enforcement. Commissioner Fricker, you can decide that you don't like me. frankly, you'll join a long list of people who don't like me. A lot of criminal defendants, some media pundits. There are plenty of people who don't like me. But I would ask that you don't make the people of Platte County pay the price of your dislike for me. In the end, the commission is correct. The auditor doesn't get to set the budget policy of this county. Only this commission can do this. This commission has all the power and authority to make these decisions. The law requires the commission to balance the budget, but how they do that is up to them. And if we are to believe Presiding Commissioner Fricker's recent statements to the media and on his campaign website, Platte County has all the tax money needed to fully fund law enforcement and keep Platte County safe. You're simply deciding today not to do that. Presiding Commissioner Fricker is correct in this when he writes on his website that without strong law enforcement, everything else in society collapses. So make no mistake, today's decision by this commission not to fully fund law enforcement will make Platte County less safe. Due to lack of funding, Platte County will become a more dangerous place to raise a family, to own a business, to go to school or work. And I will not stand silent. I will not be shushed by a presiding commissioner. I will not cut my remarks short as the commission makes that fateful decision. I urge this commission to reconsider this decision that will have lasting and negative consequences on our great county.
Kevin, do you have any other speakers that are going to speak during your presentation? There is opportunity for public comment. People can comment when it's that time. Do you have anybody else that's going to speak?
I have afforded the opportunity to any elected officials.
We would have given the opportunity to anybody to speak on this matter.
If there is an item within their budget that they would like to address, if I hit that. At the end, I will be summarizing because there's a lot of items that were part of that 600,000 that were adjusted to reduce that transfer.
Okay, but what you just did is you provided a platform for serious editorializing in the middle of a budget discussion. And I think that was completely inappropriate.
Commissioner, I didn't know what Mr. Zahn was going to say. He asked to speak.
You were in the room when he lost his cool. You knew exactly what he was going to say and exactly what his position was going to be. If you have other people that are going to speak, please have them wait until the standard public comment period, if you don't mind.
The only other one that is asked to speak is the sheriff. Would you like him to wait?
Is who?
The sheriff.
Can we wait until public comment period? I mean, what is the necessity of having it right now?
It's appropriate for the item that we were discussing, the reduction.
Because you want to editorialize on our budget. Your job is to keep track of the money. Your job is to count numbers. Your job is to make a proposed budget, not to set the permanent budget. You do not set policy. You count. And you do a pretty good job of that. And here you are editorializing through other people when you know perfectly well we have a public comment period when that is very appropriate. And anybody and everybody is welcome to speak during that period. You are turning your presentation into a political statement. And that's inappropriate, in my opinion. The sheriff is welcome to speak if that's who you want to speak on your behalf during your session in your time. and because you want to continue to make a political statement, then go right ahead.
Commissioner, I am not making a political
You
statement.
100% are. You're through proxies, through 2 proxies. Is there anybody else besides the sheriff that you want to have speak? The clerk,
No other
the
elected
collector,
indicate-
who else is disgruntled as a result of our budget? Let's run them all up here one at a time. Because it's everybody. Because we're doing what we have to do to protect the financial security of this county. Run them all up here. Let's go. Sheriff, come on up. It's out of line, Kevin.
So you know, Commissioner, what they'll be offering, what my comments won't change, whether they're presented now or later, so it's up to them.
Thank you. And I think that should have been the case with the prosecutor as well. Appreciate that, Sheriff. Happy to hear what you have to say. Is there anybody else that you'd like to bring up? There are plenty of other disgruntled people. Are you going to continue with your comments then?
Please, you turn the screen back on.
Okay.
Thank you. As I was indicating, the reduction in the transfer from the ARB from 1.8 to 1.2, from the law enforcement tax to balance the general fund, had an impact from the COLAs. In addition to it, there was a reduction from 500,000 of my recommendation in the contingency, that's account 1001, 1,699,000 of 400,000 to a more historical trend of $100,000 for unforeseen, unanticipated items. There's a reduction from my 600,000 in improvements, and that was in radio operations. We've already spoke of that. And then there was an increase in the boarding of prisoners, again, from my 600,000 to 400,000. In addition to those items, there were, as I was indicating, a number of smaller adjustments. Office holders were given the opportunity. We've been through this before, when the levy was 1 cent and things got tight. They chose to accept what was given to them, and we'll work with it as we've done in the past. So for the 2027 budget and through this year, encumbrances are a reserve of funds for known legally binding obligations. This is money that has been allocated to an office, just like with the Motorola contract. We have not expended the full amount of the contract. There's $555,000 remaining. So it is perfectly within the rights, and as indicated there, is an intent to ensure payment for goods or services already contracted. That is the definition of what a encumbrance is supposed to be for. We did incur some unusual activity in 25. In 24, our encumbrances went from, when I released, my auditor recommended we had roughly 450,000. It went up to 800 at year end. Part of that's not unusual. It's encumbering utilities, payroll, some of those items. In 25, it went from a start of 800,000 up to 1.5 million. And a little bit unusual of an activity, quite a bit higher. There are 131 encumbrances that were opened in November and December. That's a lot of activity. We did discuss those in the budget meetings. Again, it is part of the appropriation. Those cannot be affected. That's why the 550, even though it's on a contract, rolled forward. Okay? What I would propose, because that practice has been what's been going on here since I've been here, is at the end of the year, you have an anticipated expense, you know a bill's coming, you may not have it yet. So it's not just contracts. But to go ahead, it was an expense that was incurred in the current year. They set money aside to pay for it. As soon as that bill comes in, we open back up. Because they can pay that bill that maybe is received in December, in January, prior to budget approval. In non-commissioned years, yes, approval process is much earlier in the month. And like last year, when the commissioner came on board, it's at the end of the month. So it has been a practice to allow people to encumber money, so to pay those bills that come in, because once we have a hard cash number, as I presented to you today, we can start allowing payments to go out for stuff that incurred in '25. So this year, I would like to have consideration into establishing an encumbrance standard. If the commission who sets the policies, not me, if the commission wishes and desires not to have those small, I believe in one of the meetings, Commissioner Fricker, you called it a January bill. I think we were having a discussion about food service. Even though it was deliverable in December, the bill comes in, it's encumbered by the sheriff to pay that bill, which he's anticipating for activity that happened this year. We said, no, that's a January bill. If that's the way you want things addressed, then we need to come up with a standard and communicate to the office holders that that will be the practice. And then we can budget accordingly, that we won't have $1.2 million in rollovers at the end of the year. So it's discussion I would like to have this year.
I would welcome that discussion.
Thank you.
This topic of encumbrances is important.
Very.
It's kind of in the weeds, but I am sure most of these last-minute encumbrances are legitimate and warranted. I am also sure that some of them are not, and that they're put in the budget at the last minute to make it look like their budget got all used up. And if you pay the bill in January, that should be a January encumbrance. Thank you for bringing that up. We will consider your policy. It is definitely worth considering.
Thank you. The next, same line, and as consideration is being given to reestablishing the county's credit, a full fiscal policy should be developed. I mentioned that in the ARB, I expanded the budget philosophy, again, with measures that the rating agencies consider important. How is management handling certain things? For example, budget shortfalls, budget surpluses. How is that? What is going to happen with that money? This has been the first year in a number of years that we've had to borrow from another fund reserve to balance the budget. We've had excess cash. We've moved excess cash into reserves rather than moving it out of reserves back in. We'll see that swing. We'll go back the other way on the next 4 years, probably. Maybe not. But as we consider trying to reestablish the credit rating, this is something that I would like to have discussions about, because these are things that in the calls that I have sat through with them, they've asked the questions. And no prior commission has agreed to put in writing what their principle and policies are. No, Joe, you're looking at me kind of baffled. It has been a few years. I quit asking. I've written a number of budget laws and budget philosophies to support the county that have never been adopted.
Have you had calls with the credit agencies lately?
I'm sorry?
You said you learned this during your calls with the credit agencies. When was the last call that you had with the credit agency?
I believe it was 2020, Joe.
So your proposal here to reestablish the county's financial credit rating is based on information that you learned more than several years ago.
I sat through an annual call with the two major rating agencies every year. And those were questions that came up.
Yeah.
Has the county adopted a fiscal policy?
And 2020 was the last one, is that what you said?
Correct.
Okay. Well,
And since credit, obviously our credit rating was changed and we were downgraded several years ago, they haven't bothered. One doesn't even rate us. They're not going to call us for a credit rating.
right. I took office January 1, 2021, and within the first 6 months, I studied this issue, and we talked with municipal advisors that help public entities reestablish credit rating. We studied other similar public entities that had issues, and none of this was on what I learned in that first 6 months. The answers were maintain a strong financial position, which we always have. 2 was a change in leadership, which naturally occurs over time as elected officials change. And number 3 was just passage of time. So this adopting a philosophy as a way to reestablish our credit rating is not something that came up when I studied this in early 2021. But if there's a point where we're going to borrow money again, we certainly can look at this.
It needs to be done as steps to reestablishing that credit rating. We had a very strong credit rating until Zona Rosa. And
It just sounds like you're unaware of the steps that we have been taking.
I'm very aware, I sat through many of those meetings, and you're right. That's exactly what the financial advisor said. First thing he said was changing management. The management body that made the decision not to appropriate Zona Rosa, as long as they were in place, they would not consider reestablishing our credit.
Right.
It was that simple. That came from the rating agencies. It's in their letters. It's about management decisions. And this is simply a practice that demonstrates how certain things are going to be handled.
Working on the county's credit rating is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But your call for long-term forecasting is ironic, frankly. I have been asking you since I took this job over 3 years ago, 4 budgets now, for 5-year projections. I have yet to get a set of 5-year projections. In fact, when we approved purchasing this very expensive new software system, you said that it would help us because one of the things it could do is create 5-year projections. We don't get any future projecting from you. I am considering hiring an outside financial consultant to generate projections for us. How the hell are we supposed to plan 5 years out, much less 1 year out, without any projections? Yet I've been asking you for this since the very first budget I saw, which was in the first month that I was in office. Where are the projections? How are we supposed to plan? I asked you for projections, for 5-year projections about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. You said, you hemmed and hawed and said, well, we have to do some things. And I'm like, okay, well, it would be nice to have the projections before the budget's done so we can help craft a budget that takes into account the future. We don't have anything that projects our budget into the future. We are working with our hands tied. So yes, long-term forecasting is important, not just for credit rating, for the financial security of the county. And I would appreciate it if you could help in that. If not, we will hire an outside consultant to generate a set of 5-year projections for us.
Commissioner, to quote you, if you're going to put words in my mouth, you put them in correctly. I told you, yes, we had that conversation again during a conversation when there were changes that were going on in the first round of, I believe it was during the first round of encumbrances, when I brought it to your attention of the lift, without certain guidelines and without communicating to office holders that are handling their own individuals, without some philosophies in place, we cannot accurately forecast more than 3 years. And actually, when you came in, I had a 3-year forecast and I had the 10-year law enforcement tax. It can be done. It will be done.
Oh, it hasn't been done.
What I told you with this new system is this is our first year with this program. We need to get through one cycle so we understand how it works.
Let's get some long-term forecasting in place.
Pardon me?
Let's get some long-term forecasting in place. I find another municipality or county that passes a budget without 5-year projections. We don't have the staff to do that. You have a staff of people that apparently can crunch the numbers. Well, let's get some projections.
So as I mentioned, commissioners, there were a number of other smaller impacts to the auditor's recommended budget in the commission proposed. Again, this is where I afforded the opportunity for electeds to address any of those if they had. The one that was surfaced, I've already addressed, and that was for the collected.
But it says none are significant.
None are material or significant.
I have a
Yes,
question on that,
Just noting that.
on the collector. If that is right, that we can't lower the budget, is that something that can be fixed with a budget amendment sometime after today, in February or so?
I've already. fixed
He's
it.
already changed it.
Oh, he's already changed it?
Yeah. He's
Okay.
added it back to the original.
So if we want to fix it today, it's ready to fix today.
It's already fixed. He
Sorry.
changed it.
Correct. Again, that was my initial thought, was to do it in April and during our first budget amendments. But again, as I stated, I did not want to see you put forth a budget that possibly had a violation of Missouri statutes in it.
And it's a small change from 20,000 to 30,000 on one
Right.
particular line.
So essentially that means every year from here on out, forever in time, that line item can never change, can never be lowered. So the collector's legal line item budget will always be $30,000 and can never be lower than that ever.
That is correct.
That's really interesting. And that's just for that particular line item,
For her budget in total.
for her budget in total.
It's something that can be fully examined later and discussed later.
Yes, and I can change next year, you can look at it, or, whatever, you can change it, but just the amount.
Okay. Thanks, Sheila.
So if we approve the commissioner proposed budget today, it includes that.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
So we can
Yes.
approve it as is, and it will include that. Okay.
Yeah. I
The
think what,
revised commission proposed includes
Includes
that
that.
$10,000 change.
Mhm.
It includes the year-end actual cash,
cash,
and then the reduction of the transfer due to the additional cash that was collected in those final days of the year.
the two.
Does it include anything else?
No, no other changes.
Okay.
Well, there's changes for cash collections throughout
Throughout.
the budget, not
Did you
just the
in-
one item.
Did you increase anyone else's budget other than this?
An expenditure, no.
Okay.
So I believe we're at public comment, Commissioners.
Public comment.
Okay, are there any comments from the general public? Sheriff? Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. This commission has always been great supporters of law enforcement in Black County. The proposed 2026 budget, however, does not support Black County law enforcement in the way that has been done in the past. The proposed budget does not include the additional positions requested by the Sheriff's Office, including 3 positions which were created and filled in 2025 after discussion with this commission, which include discussions on funding these positions in 2026. More importantly, though, the proposed budget does not keep the salaries of our county law enforcement officers in a competitive position. Retaining our current employees and being able to attract and hire qualified applicants is essential to maintaining safety in Platte County and serving our citizens. The Commissioner's proposed budget does not even keep up with the cost of living increase employees have experienced over the last year and effectively takes us a step backwards. We all also know that at some point in the future, the county will be faced with having to give larger increases in order to make up for lost ground. In the past, we have experienced the compression and staffing shortages that were caused, at least in part, by not maintaining a competitive compensation position. Today, the Sheriff's Office is close to being fully staffed. This is in part because of the work this commission has previously done, as has other commissions, to address law enforcement compensation. The commission's current proposed budget provides less funding for the law enforcement salaries than the auditor's budget recommended. And if passed as written, will put our starting salaries over $10,000 behind some of the agencies we compete with for staff, including more than one city in the sick county. There would be, I believe, three cities in this county that would be $10,000 or more above our starting salary. The auditor presented a balanced budget to the commission. While it didn't fund salaries at the level we requested, it would put us in a better position than the current proposed budget, and shows that a more competitive salary position is possible within a balanced budget for the county. Today is not the statutory deadline for approving the 2026 budget. I urge this commission to table the passage of the 2026 budget and reconsider the funding of the law enforcement salary positions for the 2026 budget, especially in light of the information you received today regarding additional revenue collections after the budget was initially presented. Thank you.
Kevin, what is the deadline? I thought we were having this hearing today because today was the deadline.
Good question, Commissioner. The deadline is the 10th. So technically, that's Saturday, so it would be the following Monday, the 12th.
Any further questions from the public or comments? Okay, I have some comments. First, I'll address Prosecutor Zahn's comments. So his unhinged tirade the other day in the commission workshop and today's comments are all about $65,000. Is that right? I mean, that's what I heard. Is that even possible? Doesn't make any sense to me. I think he's unhappy because his staff didn't receive a bigger raise than the other people in the county. That's what's really behind it. We have always, in my previous 3 budgets, as the prosecutor said, fully funded law enforcement. Gave them exactly what they asked for. And the minute that we don't increase salaries by the amount that they wanted us to increase them by, then we get this outrage. Well, our responsibility is to the people of Platte County. And one of our number one responsibilities is to make sure that this county stays fiscally sound. And we take that job very seriously. Nobody else at this county, not the prosecutor, not the sheriff, not the other office holders, shares in that burden. That is our burden. It's our responsibility, and we're happy to take that seriously. And like I said before, if I was Commissioner Vanover or Berberick, I would be offended by the prosecutor's comments directed at me. Now, I'm okay with it. But you belittle the other commissioners when you assume that I can meet you on a Saturday before a Monday vote and just make a decision on my own. And you mentioned correctly, accurately, that I said 2 years ago, year and a half ago, that we just have excess money. because sales tax revenues exceeded projections. That was accurate. And there's two things you can do with excess money in government. Number one, you can spend it. You can grow the size of government. Or number two, you can give it back to the people who paid it in the first place. And we did the latter. Because it is one of our primary philosophies on this commission, and previous commissions I know as well, to let the taxpayers keep as much of their hard-earned money as possible. And when we have excess revenues, we're going to give it back. And we did that in 2024 by way of a 6-cent reduction in the property tax levy. And people are getting destroyed by property taxes. It is incredibly difficult for a lot of people to pay their property tax bills. And we will always prioritize the taxpayer. Second would be law enforcement. We are committed to making sure that our law enforcement agencies have the tools that they need to do their jobs, subject to the first priority, which is fiscal responsibility and our commitment to the people of Platte County to make sure that this county is fiscally sound on a year-to-year basis. And regarding the $65,000, like I said, the sheriff offered to pay for that last week. Why we're still talking about it today, I don't know. And I can't figure out why the sheriff and the prosecutor feel like their people need to make a bigger COLA than everybody else at this county. Salaries are adjusted for the importance of the position. COLAs are not. COLAs are cost of living adjustments. It didn't become more expensive to be a prosecutor or a sheriff's deputy than it did for a clerk, an administrative assistant, a maintenance tech. Two 2.5% across the board. That is reasonable. Mid-America Regional Council is giving 2%. The Midwest CPI index is 2.8. 2.5% for COLA, perfectly acceptable. And I didn't know, prosecutor, that when you gave me that check for $100 in support of my campaign, that there was a quid pro quo attached to it. So when I accept your campaign contribution, and you didn't tell me this, but now I understand it, that I had to fully fund, I had to give you whatever you wanted in your budget. That was the unsaid deal. You're making that clear now. If you would have told me that then when you handed me a check for $100, I would have told you to keep the $100. I don't need it. And I'm happy to give it back to you. Because I don't make deals for campaign contributions with anybody. I don't take money from people that want me to do something in exchange. And I'm really discouraged that that's what you expected. And with regard to the sheriff's remarks, when I first started here, my first budget was the 2022 budget. '23, thank you, 23. There were about, I don't know, at least 20 vacancies in the sheriff's office. And starting pay for a deputy was $40,000. Now that was embarrassing. You got to put on a flak jacket and strap a gun to your hip and go out there in high-speed car chases and put yourself in harm's way for $40,000 a year. And frankly, that's why we had, I think it was 22 vacancies. You can have a seat if you want. Well, that year we raised it to $45,000. And $5,000 may not sound like a lot to you, but we have what's called salary compression. Everybody above that needed a raise too, by a bigger percentage. Okay, that was a very expensive thing to do. The following year, we increased it to $50,000, and the vacancies went down further. And last year, we increased that starting pay to $55,000. So in my first 3 years as commissioner, we went from 40 to 45 to 50 to 55. And today, I don't know about today, but when we first started looking at this budget, the sheriff's office was full. We were told that there were no vacancies in the sheriff's office. He said just now, maybe there's a couple, I don't know. There's in and out, there's movement in the staff there. My understanding is it's full, which means we hit the sweet spot at $55,000. Now, if the market is going up for sheriff's deputies, if the cost of the sheriff's deputies is increasing, then we'll know after this year, because there'll be vacancies. And then we'll take action to get those filled, because we want all of our sheriff's deputies' positions filled. But our goal is not to be the highest paying jurisdiction in the state. That is not the goal. The goal is to have adequate, effective, strong law enforcement that's fully staffed and has the tools that they need to do their job. And I believe that's exactly what we do. And I do have one other thing here I want to show you. What happened to my... Mike, are you here? Can you come up for a second? Yeah, put this up there. Okay. Because we don't get graphs or pie charts or anything from the auditor, we got to kind of make our own stuff up. But if you look at these graphs, you'll see what's going on with our budget in a nutshell. This is what's happening. This is why we have some austerity this year, and we're doing some reduction in increases. I adamantly deny the accusation that there's been any cut in budgets in law enforcement. But the prosecutor's budget from 23 to 26 has increased at an annual rate of 27% annually. And the sheriff's budget by an annual rate of 29% annually. The revenues chart below, as you can tell, it's been flat. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out that that is unsustainable. Unsustainable. This tells you where the increases are coming from. Budget increases. Okay? Biggest chunk is the sheriff's office. It's not surprising. The sheriff's office is complex, has a lot of people. They do some very important things, and they have they have a lot of costs that are completely justified. We need those things. But this is almost $10 million over 3 years. Prosecutors number, $1.5 million. Okay. I'll say it again. I don't think anybody in this county who works for the county is happy with the budget. we're the ones that have to live with the consequences. We will not overspend. And we will do some projecting on our own if we can't get that help from the auditor, so that we are able to plan for the future. Thank you. Any further comments?
Just a few things. So on that note, we did get revenue projections for next year in the ARB that showed flat revenues for next year. So given that, we had to responsibly create a budget that was balanced based on that projection. And we support that projection from the auditor that revenues would be flat. So years ago, a commission was able to have that foresight, which we hope we can too in the next few years, to predict and forecast revenues and expenditures. They had that foresight, and they created a few savings funds, general funds, reserves, whatever you want to call them. And so there's a law enforcement reserve fund, and we are taking $1.2 million, $1 million from that reserve, which is supposed to last us for 4 more years. And we are using that to balance our budget. So sure, the paper makes it look like the budget is balanced, but we're balancing a budget by taking reserve money. We're not balancing our budget by money coming in or cutting spending. So I think it's all a numbers game, but a balanced budget to me is not balanced if you're taking money from reserves. So that was our first challenge. But to Commissioner Fricker's point, we looked at different line items, and the very first one was cost of living adjustment. There were some elected officials that requested anywhere from 5 to 15% salary increases. And when we started looking at other entities, local and nationally, of what the cost of living increase and inflation rates were, that was so out of line. Historically, years ago, while we were not in office, there were commissions that did not raise salaries for many years. So yes, we've been trying to catch up, but it can't happen overnight. So we have been catching up for many years. But as mentioned, Mid-America Regional Council is using 2% as their COLA this year. The Social Security Administration is using 2.8% nationally for the entire country. So 2.5 to us seemed very fair. I spent a lot of time in corporate America, and cost of living adjustment isn't a guarantee. It's not something that you just get just because. The cost of living adjustment sure should be in line with inflation, but every company doesn't just give it just because. You have to be able to be financially sound to be able to compensate at a higher rate. So we did that. I was leaning towards 2%, but we agreed on 2.5%. So it's not just a magic, you just magically get a raise every year. That's just not how it works. Another huge line item that we went over was the inmate boarding. That's a huge debate that we went back and forth on, moving it from 600,000 to 1.5 million to 1 million. It's throwing a dart at a dartboard. And at the end of the day, we might end up spending $2 million in inmate boarding to other counties. We might spend 600,000. We don't know. There's a lot of line items like that, but this inmate boarding, outboarding, whatever you want to call it, is the biggest one. And you could say, okay, well, we're transferring $1 million from the law enforcement reserve to balance our budget. How much is the line item for inmate boarding? $1 million. So that essentially is where we are unbalanced in our budget. It is an unknown number. And it might end up being higher or lower. We don't know. There's another big line item that was a big debate about radios. We went ahead and made a bigger expenditure this year that's now encumbered that we weren't expecting to, but agreed with the sheriff and his consultants and other officers that we wanted to purchase this console. So we purchased an upgraded console. So we lowered the budget for next year for radios. Not saying we don't think it's important. We understand radios change. You need the best equipment. You need them to connect to the new console, all those things. But even the auditor recommended that we phase that in. We defer that over 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. because spending $1.5 million on some radios next year did not seem like the most fiscally responsible decision. So we're phasing it in. We also had a discussion where many office holders were in attendance. It was a public meeting. We had a discussion about, let's take a conservative approach, and perhaps after Q1, Q2, 2026, we take a look at our revenues and we find out, oh, we're coming in higher than we expected, or we're coming in lower than we expected. Then we can make some budget adjustments. There is the ability for us to amend the budget. So in June, after July, after 6 months of revenues coming in, maybe we're $500,000 higher. Maybe we can say, okay, great. We're going to amend the radios budget by, $300,000 so we can start that deferred incremental purchase plan. So there are ways to amend the budget, but we're not going to dip into all of those reserves today just because everybody wants to spend money on everything. We tried really hard to make sure we funded the things that were necessary to keep our county safe and provide essential services and uphold responsible stewardship of our money.
Any further comments about the budget? Sheriff?
Just to be clear on a couple of points that the commission brought up, especially regarding the radio and the IT lines. The commission was informed multiple times through the budget process. We put the total cost of those projects in the budget so the commission could see what those total costs were, and said that they did not have to be done in a single year, and that it could be done in phases over multiple years. So we were showing you the $1 million+ expenses in radios that is coming so that you could plan accordingly. It was not saying it had to be done in a single year in 2026, if you're aware. Also, there's been a lot of talk about COLAs. Our compensation numbers, as you're aware, are based on a salary survey of law enforcement agencies in the area that we compete with for staff. It is based on the salary position for law enforcement officers. We did not put in for a cost of living adjustment, it's based on CPI. Black County has fallen behind on what law enforcement officers are paid based on what other jurisdictions that we compete with for law enforcement officers are paying. That is not a cost of living issue. That is a salary compensation position issue. That is what our request was based on. The auditor's 5% isn't what we asked for, but it puts us closer than the 2.5% COLA basis that you were requesting. But those are two different dynamics as far as how that number is arrived at.
We often get salary surveys from various office holders that show that their staffs are underpaid. Frankly, if we conducted a salary survey countywide, we could not afford to get everybody up to whatever market is. Your office is no different, Sheriff. You have a salary survey. I don't question the accuracy of that. But we did informal salary survey countywide recently, and we cannot afford to get everybody up to where some people think the market is. It's not possible. It doesn't make sense for us to do it for one office and not the others. Any further comments? Okay.
Oh, one more.
Black County Recorder Christopher Wright. Morning, Chris.
Morning, Commissioner. Well, I can say, on behalf of everybody in this room, we're glad we're not in those seats. I just wanted to say, Commissioner, I was happy to see that my budget only increased less than 0.5% over 3 years, because I've been a fiscal conservative steward of people's money, and I'm proud of that. when I became recorder of deeds, we had some deed fraud issues that were happening. I took the opportunity to use my oath of office for good, and I came up with a solution. That seems to be a problem in Platte County government. We have about 13, 14, how many are we, 15 elected officials. We have little fiefdoms. Nobody really wants to work together. And commissioners, you said to us, what can you do to reduce this? And we went through this meeting line by line. But then we had ridiculous encumbrances for $22,000 for pencils or whatever the hell it was. It was something ridiculous. I just say that as the outsider who came in, I have never been much liked by the establishment, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I would say to the people of Platte County, maybe we're going into an election year. Maybe it's just time to clean the swamp. That's what I think we ought to do. 30% pay raises for elected officials. Maybe that did something to contribute to your problems. I don't know. Not a single office holder who voted for 30% pay raise took the brunt of all of that work the legislature gave them. We gave it to our staff because that's what we do, we delegate. So I do have to say that I am not in support of a 2.5% pay raise because my employees, they do a lot of work and they make me look very, very good. And they deserve more than 2.5%. I also think you guys missed the mark on some things. I mean, you want to balance a budget. We get on the 15th, we approved $58,000 for office furniture. We renovated an office for $100 and some thousand for no reason other than just to renovate it because somebody wanted to get their way and they threw a fit. And that, by the way, cost the taxpayers of this county tens of thousands of dollars because it was a frivolous, ridiculous allegation that almost ruined a man's career. So I say to the people of Platte County, get rid of the swamp, vote out the incumbents, and make Platte County better. Thank you, commissioners.
Any further comments? Nobody wants to follow that, I'm sure. Okay. Seeing no further comments, it is 11:43 a.m. and this public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to 2026 CO-001, the approval of the Platte County Commission proposed budget. Auditor Robinson.
Commissioners, David Robinson, County Auditor. Before you is the Commissioner's proposed budget. We voted on the public hearing, noted that there are changes to it. They are reflected in the copy the clerk has, specifically related to cash that was collected after the publication that the Commission proposed, with one expenditure increase that was discussed for the realignment of the collector. With that, Commissioners, I respectfully request that you approve the Commission proposed budget as presented, as updated, and discussed.
I move approval of 2026-CO-001, the approval of the 2026 Platte County budget as updated today.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any comments about the budget that we haven't heard? Commission?
No comments.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fricker?
Yes.
Commissioner Herbert?
Yes.
Commissioner Vanacker?
Yes.
That motion carries 3-0. Next on the agenda, 2026 CO-004 to be presented by Platte County Administrator Wes Minder. Morning, Wes.
Good morning, Commissioners. County Commission Order 2026 CO-004 is a nice way to start 2026. It closes out a chapter in the county's history. Just to summarize the long story and make it very short, years ago, previous commissions got into the development business, and the county got involved in the development of Zona Rosa, which created issues both financially because the center is underperforming, but also required the county to own a couple parking garages where there were no funds available for the development generated to provide for the maintenance of it. which created a large liability for the county. The county commission retained Graves Garrett Law Firm, and the firm, along with Commissioner Vanover, has been working on a solution to this problem. And with the passage of this order, the county will fulfill or remove any sort of financial, legal, maintenance obligations on those parking garages. And the interested parties admit that the county is at non-fault for any sort of default or any other items. And with the passage of this and other parties, we will turn those deeds over to the owners of Zona Rosa, and they will do their financial arrangements to cover the debts for those garages. And we will move forward with the next chapter of county financial responsibility.
I move to approve 2026-CO-004, authorizing an agreement and deed related to Zona Rosa development.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Just a quick comment before you. This is very important. Commissioner Vanover is going to go into it a little bit, but I want to make an analogy between these parking garages, which became a liability for the county, in that they are falling apart. And the county would have had to pay for repairs had we not got out of this deal. They're a liability. But we have two other liabilities in this county, and they're called the community centers. We own those buildings. The YMCA gets to operate them rent-free, but they are a liability because they're getting old, and somewhere down the road, there's going to be a lot of expenses associated with them. When I first got in office, I tried to give them to the YMCA. They wouldn't take them. And then I tried to give them to the city of Parkville and the city of Platte City, and they wouldn't take them. And what does that tell you? They don't want them because they're liabilities. And county governments and municipalities need to stay out of private development deals and do their best to perform the basic functions that people demand of their local governments. And as long as I'm commissioner, we will not be getting involved in private real estate development deals. Commissioner Vanover.
Yes. UMB Bank, as the trustee for the bondholders and the present developer of Zona Rosa, are currently suing each other over the repayment of bonds and maintenance of 3 parking garages within the Zona Rosa shopping complex. In early 2025, they issued a notice that they wanted to settle their lawsuits between each other by extending the special sales tax for Zona Rosa. The Platte County government hired Todd Graves and his law firm and intervened in the lawsuit. For the last few months, we have been negotiating a way for the Platte County government to get out of the public financing of Zona Rosa completely. The settlement agreement says, quote, "The parties acknowledge that the county is not and has never been in default on any obligations related to the Series 2003 bonds, the Series 2007 bonds, or any agreement named in the county complaint, the settlement agreement, or this addendum to which the county was a party." As part of this vote today and the agreement of the other parties to this, the county will transfer the parking garages to the transportation development districts in Zona Rosa. The bank and the developer agree that Platte County can withdraw from this public financing scheme. The county government previously won a lawsuit that confirmed we are not obligated to pay shortfalls in sales taxes to repay these bonds. And with this agreement today, the county government will withdraw completely from public financing of Zona Rosa.
I trust that that's why the news is here today at our meeting, because this is far more newsworthy than anything else on our agenda today.
It's a time when governments want to get involved in private development, and Platte County is going the opposite direction. We're getting out of public financing of private development.
Any further comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fricker?
Yes.
Commissioner Berger?
Yes.
Commissioner Banner.
Yes.
That motion carries 3-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda, 2026 CO003 to be presented by Parks and Recreations Director Daniel Erickson. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning. Daniel Erickson on behalf of the Parks and Recreation Department.
This better be interesting and exciting.
Very interesting. It's important. Sun Flat Pass Trail, one of the first trails that was built under the Parks and Stormwater Sales Tax, which was passed by the voters. The trail, I think, off the top of my head, I believe it's 7 miles long, extends from 435 near Rinkmeyer on the west, all the way to I-29 on the east. It's an asphalt trail mostly. We're seeking a contract with a company called BHC Incorporated for have them go ahead and prepare some bid specs to have that trail resurfaced. Including in that are some improvements. There are some areas where the trail narrows down to just a small sidewalk. There are some missing areas, a small little area near the intersection of 9 Highway. We'd like to have a trail go through, so people aren't walking through parking lots to get the continuing trail. So it's an important project. This contract between Platte County and BHC has been reviewed by the county auditor, has been reviewed by county legal counsel. It is completely funded by the parks tax. The amount of the contract is $124,150. Staff recommend you approve this contract and start designing this important maintenance project.
I move approval of 2026-CO-003 professional services contract with BHC Inc.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on this item. Are there any comments?
So this is just for the design. So do we have a ballpark of what the cost could be for this project?
It'll go up a bit.
Sure,
I don't want to
sure.
We did a similar bid for the Perkins Greenway, and those bids ultimately for construction came in about $1 million. So
Okay.
I would expect it'll be less what I'm budgeting.
And is this re-asphalt or is this concrete?
This is re-asphalt.
Okay.
It's it'd be $3 million, $4, $5, $6 million
Okay.
converted at this point. So we try to avoid asphalt trails
Sure.
now, but when parks
It's already there.
first started, it started asphalt.
But for those construction companies that might be listening to this, we expect it to come in way below $1 million.
We're expecting
Way below.
around
Yeah,
$200.
okay. All right. Any further comments? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Freier?
Yes.
Commissioner Berger?
Yes.
Commissioner Banner?
Yes.
And motion carries 3-0. Any announcements from county office holders and staff? Any additional comments from the public about anything? Commission comments? Okay,
I move to adjourn.
Second.
we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Freier?
Yes.
Commissioner Berger?
Yes.
Commissioner Banner?
Yes.
That motion carries 3-0. It's 11:53 a.m. and we are adjourned.